Hello and welcome to Inside View. I am your host, Joel Metzger, and joining me on the show tonight is Jim Miller. He's the Dean of Students for the Gold Rush Charter School in Sonora.
Sonora. Yeah.
Also a renowned author.
Yeah, not so renowned.
Jim, it's a pleasure to have you on the show. I always really enjoy having you on. I appreciate the way you look at the world. I think that not many people look at the world this way, and maybe we should look at the world more this way sometimes. So
I enjoy it.
It's a unique view. For those who may have not heard us talk in the past, I'd really love it if you would give us a little look into your past, and let's go all the way back to where you grew up, and then finish with your current position.
You're talking about 73 years of
all
story.
Right.
Here
Well,
we go.
that's
all right.
challenge.
Okay. Joel, I was born on the peninsula in Belmont. Grew up there. Was the perfect teenager for the early 60s, which meant I didn't like school. I didn't have any use for it and barely got through it. But because you had to be 21 to be an adult in those days, my parents forced me to continue on to go to college. Had they not done that, I wouldn't be sitting here with you. All right. And the way I looked at myself was I was like the old air-cooled Volkswagens. If you pushed them long enough, they eventually started, right? So eventually my parents didn't have to push me anymore, and then I started to like it. But I like traveling more than anything, so I'd save up money, take off, spend as much time out of the country as I possibly could, run out of money, find a way to, excuse me, Donald Trump, work illegally in the countries I was in, and then move on. But I wound up taking a teaching job in Australia and thought as much as I hated teachers and as much as I disliked school, I could do it for a little while. And like I said to you last time, it's now 48 years later. I liked it.
Still in education.
Yeah.
What were the other places that you went when you were
mostly in Europe, a little bit into a lot in the Caribbean, and a little bit into South America, Venezuela. A couple of places like that, a lot of the lower islands, Grenada and so forth, but and then a fair amount in Thailand and Australia, New Zealand.
Any particular spot really capture your heart?
Two, New Zealand and Thailand.
Now those are completely different
places. And if you believe in past lives, which I don't, I was Thai at one time. And I was also a New Zealander at one time, because the New Zealanders are much more reserved than the Australians, which is where I taught. And they're much closer to their British origins than the Australians are. And I like that reserved kind of approach that they have. So I'll take either country. You can send me there anytime you want.
And the scenery isn't bad in New Zealand either.
Oh, God, it's beautiful. I'll tell you what, when I was there, it's a lot different. I mean, it was so long ago that my accent was unusual. Well, now it's a safe place for Americans to travel, and there's a lot of foreign money going in and buying up the place. And but when I was there were more sheep than people. You know?
Wow.
Yeah.
Now, was it the food or the culture in Thailand that spoke to you?
Both. I have a friend who came over here as an exchange student at 15 and stayed till he was 35. But he came from a very wealthy family, and the grandfather died, skipped my friend's father, and put my friend in charge of the family business. So he had to go home, and he was really bummed by that. So we went over to visit him, and it was like, oh, I like this place, you know. And he was complaining that he really wanted to go back to California, and I'm saying, you're crazy. This is the nicest place in the world, and the food's the best. And the people, when you get into the airport, now it's increased in population, but when I was doing it, there was a poster that would say, welcome to Thailand, the land of 40 million smiles. And as my friend would say, he said, people smile even when they're ripping you off. You don't mind it, right? So, and the people you couldn't have more friendly, personable people. So I went over there, we started a business so we could keep going back, bringing carvings over here, carousel horses and so forth. And I kept trying to learn Thai, and I'd learn more and more. And when I go back to Thailand, I'd try it on people, and I'd say, it's very, very good. Now let me do my English. So I never learned Thai. You didn't have to.
Okay,
you know?
okay.
And but it's absolutely fabulous country. It's a beautiful country.
So you had this opportunity to travel, but you ended up taking this position in Australia. What was it about teaching that actually grabbed you and made you want to dedicate your career?
Australia in those days homogeneously grouped kids. So the top class kids were called 1A. They went on down from there. They're not going to give an untrained teacher 1A, but they gave me 1F, right? And I walked in to the same kids I was when I was in school. So it was real easy to relate to them. And I think, as I told you before, none of them could understand my accent. I made one cry the first day, right? Never been so nervous or feeling incompetent in my life as I did at that point. But my kids kind of got along with me. I think I told you I had to have one cane to prove that I was part of the culture. And then it was just a ball. They were just wonderful kids, and they grew, and they enjoyed it, and it was fun. It wasn't work. And the thing that I learned from them was that you have to establish relationships with kids. And what I see from teaching colleges now, it's like, stand back, do not become involved in any kind of a personal way with a kid. Don't touch them, don't pat them on the back, don't do any of this stuff. I'm an old guy. I don't believe in any of that, right? So I'll give you, for instance, today, we had a girl that joined our school a couple of months ago, and she was sunken into herself. She was shy. She terrible grades, really uncomfortable, really not very, very secure at all. And the problem is that she wasn't very attractive in her mind, right? But if you take one look at her, especially as an old guy, you take one look at her and you say, I recognize that kid. That's the ugly duckling. She's going to grow into being a very attractive girl one day, right? So my thing is, hey, do you know what's going to happen to you, kid, one day? She goes, what? I said, do you know the story of the ugly duckling? She said, yeah. I said, well, guess what, Swan? You're going to be fine, right? She looks at me like, what do you mean? I said, what you don't know is, first of all, you're a very bright kid. You've proven that with your entrance tests. So now you got to make a decision. You're going to grow into being a beautiful woman. Are you going to rely on your beauty, or are you going to rely on your beauty and your brains? And it was like, and you could just see her saying, I'm going to be beautiful, right? And it's like, yeah, because kids believe what teachers tell them. And most of the time, unfortunately, teachers say a lot of negative things as motivators. You can't be lazy like this. You've got to get this work done. An expert tells you you're lazy, all right? So, and then people will encourage, hey, you did a good job on that. But we don't talk to the kid about the kid. And I don't know if you remember being a teenager, but it's a pretty insecure time, right? So if you have somebody that's telling you that the future is going to be pretty bright and is very specific about it, then you know what? You kind of go, oh, there is hope, right? Plus, I don't know if I told you this when they did the survey years ago in convalescent hospitals. Did I tell you the story already? Okay. So I tell my kids every year. They ask people at the end of their lives to rank the 4 stages of life: childhood, adolescence, adulthood, and old age. What do we tell kids about their teenage years? What's the common thing that we tell kids about life as a teenager?
That it's terrible?
That's not what we say. We say this is the best time of your life. You have no responsibilities. All you've got to do is go to school. That's what we say. Huh. That's the common thing that people will say to kids, right? You don't have the responsibilities I have, all that stuff, right? Well, when they ask people at the end of their lives, the very best stage of life is adulthood, second is old age, third is childhood. Now, those varied with people, but universally, adolescence came up last. And they come up last and the reason we tell kids it's a good time of your life is because we forget those things that we now see as insignificant once we're adults, but make or break your life when you're a kid. You get a date with the girl that you've been wanting a date with for 6 months, and you wake up on Saturday morning around noon, like most kids, right? And you look in the mirror, and you've got a white head on the end of your nose as big as a golf ball. How's your day going to go?
Terrible.
How's your date? The whole day's ruined. Your life is ruined, right? At my age, I got a big white head on the end of my nose. I go, got to go to work, right? Doesn't matter. But we forget that those things happen to kids. You can't drive. You have no freedom. You can't go where you want. You can't do what you want. I think I told you that my image of teenagers is crawling up into their parents' lap, looking for comfort and security, and at the same time screaming, leave me alone.
Contradiction in terms.
Absolutely. And what happens to parents in an instance like that is they hear the rejection. They don't realize that they have an opportunity to give comfort and security. and because we all have egos and we get them hurt, right? But teenagers, it's a terrible time of life. It's absolutely terrible, and you have to go to school to learn stuff that doesn't have any bearing on what you're going to be doing on the weekend. So, and then as parents, we worry about the kids' future. Kids worry about Friday. I said that one to you before, right?
How does a parent go about preparing to handle this contradictory messages coming from?
First of all, you got to be aware that they're happening. I don't know. I lucked out. I can remember what it was like being a kid. A lot of my friends don't, which is real interesting that they've just forgotten all that stuff. But the main thing is that you're dealing with somebody who's neither fish nor fowl. They're not a child. They're not a man. This book that I brought prepared you to be a man by the end of the 8th grade. So in 1900, the first modern usage of the word adolescent was used in 1900. Before that, there was no stage of life called adolescence. And the term, the guy that created or reused the term from ancient times, said it was a period of great turmoil, parental and child discord, and reckless behavior. And that was adolescence, because we no longer put kids in the mines when they were 5 and 6 years old. We wanted to give them a better life than we had. We wanted to give them more education. So we stopped them from being adults and told them that you are now in school for another 4 years. Right? And so what parents don't do is they don't realize that kids go through really tough times. And I told you the one last time about parent power and parent pressure is much greater than peer pressure. And kids want parents to use that pressure. They want them to use it with respect, with hopefully some humor and consistency. And they want them to be leaders. They don't want to be the ones in charge. And so if parents want to take control, it's very difficult these days. You get such contradictory advice about what to do with kids. Just on the way over here today, you realize you should never spank your kids. That's just been proven, scientifically proven. You should never spank your kids, except that you can read another one that says, a good paddling doesn't hurt anybody, right? So what do you do? What do you do? So parents get confused. They don't do anything. You get into a situation in the public where your kid's misbehaving, and you don't know what to do. Somebody's going to call CPS if you discipline them too much, right? Or somebody's going to look at you funny. So you grit your teeth, you white knuckle the shopping cart, and you just try to get through it the best you can, right? So to use that as an example, one of the things that I tell parents to do is practice. It's like, take your kids to situations where they don't do well when you don't have to be there, all right? And you tell them, we're going into the store, we're going to shop, we're going to do this. And if you want to give them a little prize at the end, that's fine, right? But you have to behave. Now, the moment they misbehave, you turn around, you leave, all right? Because what we do is we're in a hurry, we go to the shopping mall or whatever, we go to the supermarket, and we have to get our groceries. So when the kid's going ballistic, we just grit it and we get through it, right? Whereas if you practice it, the kid learns pretty quick. You know what, if I'm well behaved, it pays off.
I mean, it's very similar to training anything, really.
Absolutely.
Consistency, firmness, always giving them the leadership that they need.
Right.
And as soon as you start being inconsistent, then you lose a lot of the headway that you've made.
You lose the headway, and what you lose is you create a confused kid or a confused dog, right? I just went last weekend with a friend to look at a horse that he was thinking about buying. And the horse was beautiful, incredibly well-trained, but had never been out of an arena. And this guy wants a horse that he can work with and take outside. So this horse hadn't even been around other horses. So it reminds me of parents that hover over their kids and make sure that they're there all the time and controlling them all the time. And then all of a sudden you get out into the real world. How do you do? I mean, this guy didn't buy the horse, right? Because he couldn't. What was he going to do with a horse that he couldn't go anywhere with? So you have to be consistent. You have to be persistent, insistent. You got to have a sense of humor, right? And if you can do that, a funny thing happens. Your kids begin to believe in you. And you really don't have to change your personality much. You just have to stick with a simple plan. And that's that whole idea of my book. It's a simple plan. And if you do it, funny thing happens. Your kid comes around in about 3 weeks.
3 weeks.
3 weeks. I think I told you about the girl that was, well, I'll tell it to you again. You ready? Girl was described as clinically depressed, potentially suicidal, a pain in the neck, and a totally disruptive kid, but very intelligent. She moved back in with her natural mother, and her natural mother had been cut out of the whole thing from kindergarten through 7.5 years. So it's the middle of the girl's 8th grade year, and they call her in for a meeting. And they tell her that, maybe you'd like to put her in a private school, or maybe she should be tested for special ed, but we have to do something. She's ruining the classes she's in. So I told her to take this program that I've got and suggest that they use it. They were reluctant. They finally agreed to it. And the whole thing is just a paper report card, but it's what you do with the paper report card. Every school has one. Nobody knows what to do with them. So the whole idea is that you get a paper report card, and when the kid brings it home on Friday, if it's good, he gets a good week. The next week is whatever privileges you allow him, he gets them. If he doesn't, he's totally restricted for 1 week. All right? So this little girl comes in halfway through the 8th grade, as I said, comes in the first week. She's restricted. She can't believe it. This has never happened to her before in her life, right? Raises the roof. She's so upset. Second week, same results. The third week, Joel, she comes in, she slams the paper down on the table in front of her mother and says, "Are you satisfied now?" Yep, right? 5 weeks later, she's on the honor roll. At the end of the 8th grade year, she's not only on the honor roll, she's voted the most improved kid in the school, given a presidentially signed citation, volunteered unrequested to sing the national anthem at her own graduation ceremony, and did a beautiful job. And we didn't hear any more mentions of clinical depression or potential suicide, right? Which is one of my problems with all that stuff.
Wow.
You know?
Tell me about this book that you brought in today.
All right. This book, which you'll never see on there, it's a state textbook from 1887 for advanced mathematics. And the whole idea is that kids were going to be adults by the end of the 8th grade. So this is a 6th grade through 8th grade textbook. And I'll just read you a couple of the things that kids did in those days. They had to learn partnerships. They had to learn profit and loss. They had to learn insurance, taxes, stocks, partial payment, compound interest, accounts, exchanges, and basically all the other basic math. But all of it is word problems. And as I told you earlier, I gave a problem on partnerships to a girl who's an outstanding math student, is doing Algebra 2, and she couldn't figure out how to create the right percentages for a partnership and how to split the profit. And so she looked at it and she finally just said, "Well, I'll just cut it in half," right? So the guy that put the less money in was quite happy with that, right? The other guy wasn't going to be too happy. And when I took it to the math teacher, who's really a brilliant math teacher, he had to remember those kinds of functions because of now we're teaching higher order math skills.
This book was in a very different time, and as you mentioned, we moved to extending the number of years that young folks went through education, and that really kind of pushed back their adulthood. You know,
right.
You said it was 21 when you were young,
yeah.
and now we're kind of at 18.
Yep.
So do you believe that we really are capable of being adults at a much younger age than what we...
Absolutely not.
No.
I mean, we were capable in these days. Life was somewhat simpler. Your life expectancy was a lot shorter. You know, I mean, the average age of a soldier in the Revolutionary War was like 15, 16, right? So the whole thing was that you were going to be in a simpler world where you had to, and you learned early. You didn't walk out and start a partnership after the 8th grade, but you were in apprenticeship programs or you worked in your father's store or whatever, but you had the basis to start to take over. And people married young, you know, they married at 14, 15. So, but as we've stretched our childhood or our youth, which is becoming the 5th stage of life, we're not anywhere near as prepared to be adults. I mean, I don't know about you at 18, but if anybody gave me my freedom at 18, I wouldn't be here. It just wouldn't have happened. It had to be 21 for me, and I could have walked away from my parents, at any time after high school, but I allowed them, without agreeing with them, to push me, and accepted that they had control over me. And to me, we should be 21 again. The reason we went to 18 was because of Vietnam. If you can go off and be killed, you should be able to be an adult.
Wow. So you're not saying that we should go back to trying to be an adult after the 8th grade.
Oh, no.
What you're saying is the preparation of our youth has changed dramatically.
Exactly.
And these are some of the things that have a more real life application.
I mean, if you're going to get out of school, when you went to high school, did you learn anything about business?
Not really.
No. You didn't learn about partnerships or insurance or taxes. You learned them the hard way. If you're like me, it took me 5 banks to finally figure out that if I had a check, I still had to have money behind it, And but I learned it the hard way. So these things were teaching people how to live a practical life. We've kind of given that up for a much more ethereal thing of like higher order thinking skills and being into technology. That this is going to be the answer.
Tell me about higher order thinking. That's a term that you use a lot. How would you define that?
Well, I'll give you an example in math. This math teacher was just telling me he went to a conference, and what they want you to do now is explain how you arrived at your answer. It doesn't even matter if the answer is wrong. They want you to be able to explain. They want you to be able to do technical readings and understand technical information, and be able to explain how to, put a camera together, for instance. They want you to be able to think in a way that allows you to incorporate all of these things that you're supposed to already know. But most kids don't know it, right? So, our kids come to our school, and their tested scores when they come in are incredibly low, right? But they've all been through Math 1, which is a new style of math, right? But some of them can't even multiply. So we kind of just jump over the basic skills and think that we can put together a way of thinking that we don't need those skills. I think I told you before that a fellow said we don't need to memorize things anymore because we have Google, right? Well, who's writing Google?
Someone who knows these skills.
Right, and is also, or is telling you what he wants to tell you.
So that opens us up to be manipulated.
Absolutely.
But that's something I wanted to ask you about. In the world of Google, honestly, like you gave the example of a partnership, you literally could put that into Google, even in a question format,
sure,
and it would spit out the correct answer.
Right.
So with a resource that has that kind of power, and let's say Google is someone that can be trusted, or a company that we can trust, and they really are giving you the correct information and not trying to manipulate you. Could there be an argument that you don't need to know as much or memorize as much when everything is right there at your fingertips, faster than you could even calculate it in your head?
So here's my argument back. I take what Google says, all on faith and trust. I take that, and now we formed a partnership, and now we know how we're going to split that $1,840 profit, right? What else do I know? I know what Google just told me, but I don't know that intrinsically. I don't know that. I don't feel that. I haven't worked it out in my own way to see that, I can see how it arrived at that. Google just gave me the answer, right? So, it's up to who you want to trust. I'd rather trust my own memory.
But someone wrote those textbooks that told you how to figure it out. What if they were out to get you?
They could have been out to get you. You have to realize, anybody can be out to get you at any time. But by having to work through the things, as someone said recently, we try to remember to exercise our body, and now people are making fortunes by giving you different ways of exercising your mind, right? So while we're telling people that they don't need to memorize anything, we're selling old people programs to improve their memory.
There's a connection there.
Yeah.
That if you stop exercising your mind in these ways, then you end up having a stagnant mind.
Right. And it actually doesn't grow. I mean, that's why those programs, and I can't think of the names of them, but you hear them all the time.
Lumosity or
right,
something like
exactly.
that. Yeah.
You know, exercise your brain, improve your memory, you know, expand your ability to think. Well, don't we want to do that at an earlier age too? You know? And so my thing is that, as this math teacher said, when he asked these people after they were told that it's really coming up with figuring out the process you used and writing it down, even if you got the wrong answer, that was the important thing. His question for the people was, do we ever teach math? And he didn't get an answer.
We have 3 minutes left, Jim.
Oh, okay.
I wanted you to tell the viewers a little bit about the book that you wrote, and I know there may be some excitement, and we might not get into that, but just give us a little overview.
Okay. The book came about because of parents telling me I had to write it, all right? Because I explained to you about using a weekly report card. We electronically can check our kids' grades all the time, and our kids are going to have every reason why the grades aren't real. We're looking at something that we'd rather not look at when we're tired at the end of the day, and there's no connection to anything other than the computer, my kid standing here, and me. Now, if you've trained your kid early on, it'll work. But if you have a kid who's having problems, he's going to dismiss it as not real, and you're going to be so tired that you're not going to really get into the argument about it. Whereas if I bring home a paper to you, and it's filled out by the teachers, which is a really simple form, and it's filled out by the teachers that said you had a good or a bad week, basically. I'm making contact with you, physical contact. You have to deal with that paper, all right? You can't ignore it, and I have to bring it home, because if I don't bring it home, I lose my privileges for 1 week, all right? The trick is that once you get the report from me, if I've lost my privileges, you don't do it meanly. It's basically like you don't get paid. Right? You're trying, and it also teaches kids, hey, cause and effect. You didn't work. Why should you get paid? And then you become a cheerleader. You say, all those toys that I bought you, all the electronic things that I bought you, they're because I want you to have them. But you have to earn them. So I have to take them away for a week. Right? I don't want to take them away, but you didn't earn them. I know you're going to earn them the following week. So you become a cheerleader, and every kid will say, I know what I'm doing. Leave me alone. My grades will get better. We've all said that, and we've all heard that, right? Well, now you got an incentive to make it happen. Whereas if you say, by the next report card, you better be, well, the next report card's 8 weeks away, right? So this is 1 week at a time. Kids' whole idea of the future is 1 week at a time, right? So they can envision that. It's not killing them. It's when you say you're grounded for the summer, it isn't going to happen. You know it. The kid knows it. So there's no bearing on it. But 1 week at a time is pretty painful.
Book is called Parent Power Tips.
And TIPS just stands for Take Initiative Parents.
Can you get it on Amazon?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay,
Not yet.
We'll come back and give the update of where you can buy the book.
Right. It's getting there.
Jim,
All
thank
right.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining me on this edition of Inside View. I'm your host, Joel Metzger, and I hope you join me next time.